Let's talk about the fear of speaking Spanish in real life and how to get past it. If you have Spanish speakers in your life, you probably feel like there's a giant canyon between you and them. Making a real connection in Spanish feels very difficult or impossible. And if you want to practice speaking Spanish with them, but in the moment it always seems easier just to use English, you're not alone. Most of us who grew up speaking English and then had to try to learn Spanish as adults have a really deep-seated fear of getting that vulnerable. Because when you try to speak your second language, you can feel like you're a toddler just trying to get out a few words and knowing that they're probably wrong. It seems embarrassing or intimidating and just plain scary. Now, of course, you know deep down that the Spanish speakers in your life want to support you. They appreciate your efforts to try to speak Spanish, and they don't mind that you're making mistakes. So theoretically, it should all be fine, right? But knowing that might not be enough. You need a way to get past enough of the fear that you don't just theoretically feel good about practicing with your Spanish-speaking loved ones, you actually do it, and you do it more and more consistently. So today, I'm going to share with you a plan that works. It's worked for hundreds of our students, and it'll work for you as well. First of all, I'll share our top technique for recruiting Spanish speakers to practice those baby steps of confidence with you in a way that they'll be very comfortable with and that involves basically no face-to-face awkwardness at all. And then I'll go over a mindset technique that you can use anytime you find yourself about to enter a high-pressure situation. You know, one of those moments like a family gathering or a business event where you know that you're going to need to pull out all the stops and use Spanish for real. Let's get started. It's time to finally overcome that fear of speaking Spanish and bridge the gap between you and deep personal connection in Spanish. Technique number 1 is simply to text in Spanish. The first step to overcoming your fear of speaking Spanish is to start by using Spanish in a way that causes as little fear as possible. When I first discovered texting in Spanish, it changed my life, because I'd always wanted to learn more real-life Spanish, not just the stuff that I'd studied in books, but the way that people actually talk in everyday life. So I thought the best way to do that would be to have real-life conversations, right? But of course, when I tried speaking Spanish face-to-face, out loud, I not only felt nervous, I couldn't even figure out what I was missing. Then I started having texting conversations in Spanish, and it kind of blew my mind. Suddenly, my Spanish-speaking friends were having casual chats with me using real-life phrases and vocabulary that they would in face-to-face conversation, and I could learn from it much more easily. Here are 3 ways that texting in Spanish can help you overcome the fear of speaking Spanish in real life. First of all, when you're texting, you can take your time. Unlike in face-to-face conversation, there's less pressure to respond right away. You can think carefully about how to put your Spanish sentences together. And yes, there may still be some anxiety around the fact that you're having a Spanish conversation with a real person, but you can pace yourself. Take a break if you get too nervous, and then come back when you feel your confidence returning. This is a great way to build up your confidence using real-life Spanish with a real person, but with much less time pressure. Second, you can look things up. If your friend uses a word that you don't know, you can step away from the chat, look that word up, learn how it's used and what it means in context, maybe even make a flashcard for your own learning, and then go back to the conversation. In a face-to-face conversation, it's a lot harder to stop and look things up, but it works super well in a text chat. Third, when texting, you can practice speaking out loud. During text conversations, you can take breaks, look back at sentences that your texting buddy sent you, and practice saying those things out loud. The thing is, if you want to get confident speaking Spanish out loud when face-to-face, one of the quickest ways to build that confidence is while you're practicing on your own. And of course, when you're texting, this is an amazing opportunity to mimic the way that native speakers talk using the exact phrasing that you're seeing popping up on your phone, but of course, with much less stress than in real-life conversations. So practice speaking Spanish out loud as much as possible when on your own, especially when texting in Spanish. If you don't already have a Spanish coach or any friends that you can text with in Spanish, check out our coaching offerings at SpanishVideoCourse.com and we'll match you with a native Spanish speaker who will be a dedicated language coach for you. One way or another, start texting in Spanish as soon as possible. It'll help you bridge that giant gap between Spanish study and true Spanish conversation. All right, technique number 2 is what I call a prep ritual for Spanish conversation. So let's say it's the moment of truth. You're going to have a real-life Spanish conversation with Spanish speakers who are important to you, and hopefully, this is where everything you've been practicing comes together. But picture yourself about to walk into a room full of Spanish speakers. How do you feel? Excited, terrified, or somewhere in between? Next time that you're in that situation, let's set you up for success. When it's been a long time since I've spoken much Spanish, I like to use what I call a prep ritual before switching languages. Basically, what this ritual does is it warms you up to the language. It puts you in the right mindset for when you inevitably mess up or make mistakes, and it also helps encourage you to relax and enjoy the experience. If you can make this experience as positive as possible, it'll help you overcome the fear of speaking Spanish step by step over time. So here's the ritual I recommend. First, review some vocabulary. Several hours before the conversation, review some specific words on topics that you think you might end up talking about. For example, if your Spanish-speaking in-laws like talking about sports, do a quick review of your sports terminology in Spanish, preferably using flashcards. Second, practice some listening and speaking in Spanish. This helps warm up your ears and mouth for Spanish conversation. I recommend using a tool that we call audio quizzes. These are basically like flashcards, but they're audio and they're very grammar heavy. You can find a whole vault of these resources at SpanishVideoCourse.com for free. When you do this part of the routine, spend at least a few minutes listening attentively and, of course, speaking out loud. Third, visualize yourself making mistakes. I know that doesn't sound motivating, but the fact is you're going to mess up in the Spanish conversation, at least at some point. So you may as well be ready for it. To prepare your mindset right before you go into that situation, remind yourself that messing up is okay. It's part of the growing process. And also remind yourself that the Spanish speakers in your life appreciate you, they want to encourage you, and they want you to mess up and grow from it. So making mistakes is fine. Now specifically, here's what I recommend. Right before joining a conversation where you're going to use Spanish, tell yourself these two things out loud. First, the Spanish speakers in my life are excited to help me improve. Second, when I get lost while speaking or listening, it means I've found an exciting opportunity to improve my Spanish. Say these two things to yourself, take a deep breath, and then enter the room with confidence. It's time to have some positive, fearless experiences in Spanish. So those are the top 2 techniques that we use with our coaching students for overcoming your fear of speaking Spanish. If you're serious about communicating in Spanish, which tip are you going to start following right away? Leave a comment on this video to let me know. Or if you have your own techniques that have helped you build confidence in speaking Spanish in real life, I'd love to hear them in the comments. Also, subscribe to this channel for more mindset hacks to help you master real-life Spanish and make deep, personal connections with the Spanish speakers in your life.